everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rebecca Roberts. I'm Associate Director of Programmes and Partnerships at City Bridge Foundation, and I'm introducing today's webinar. The session is for organisations that are interested in our climate and environmental justice programme, and we're recording the session and we'll share slides and a recording afterwards. Yesterday, we published our programme priorities, our guidelines and eligibility criteria on our website, and we hope you've had a chance to review them. And if you haven't yet, please do, and we'll share links in the chat. We've had a huge level of interest in today's webinar. I can see that we have almost more than 200 people that have joined us. We understand that it's a challenging funding environment, and we also appreciate that your time is precious. So if you're on the call and realise that this programme's not for you, it's absolutely okay to drop off the call at any point. So the plan for this session. So I'm going to talk you through briefly our funding policy, Standing with Londoners, and then my colleagues are going to walk you through the first round of our climate and environmental justice programme, and we will leave time for questions at the end. So as I mentioned, we encourage you to engage and read the materials that we've shared. And if after watching the webinar and reading the resources you're unsure, then please do book a pre-application call with us. And they will be offered until all call bookings have been filled, and will be opened for bookings from Monday the 6th of July. And the calls will be available to book between the 14th of July and the 21st of August. So today on the call, we're joined by our climate and environmental justice team, and that's Clara Espinosa, Maria Hughes and Kate Hallahan, and they will be talking you through the programme and answering questions later on. We're also joined by Teresa Bowden, our BSL interpreter. So we will have captions. We do have captions and transcript turn on, and if you can't see them, then please do adjust your view and you can click show captions. The chat function's disabled at the moment, and we will be monitoring the Q&A function on Zoom, and we're going to open the Q&A a bit later. So we'll allow you to have a chance to hear the presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So City Bridge Foundation, we're a 900-year-old charity, and our primary purpose is the stewardship and maintenance of 5 London bridges, including the iconic Tower Bridge. And for the last 30 years, we've also been funding London's voluntary sector. So last year, we launched Standing with Londoners, and it sets the direction of our funding over the next 10 years. And we built that funding policy through sector engagement. We learned from our funding to date, and we drew on a wide range of research and literature and a kind of understanding of the many challenges that Londoners face. And this policy is a critical step forward in our journey as a social justice funder. And when we talk about social justice, it means that we will be firmly focused on changing the systems that keep people marginalised, while also addressing the issues that communities face right now. So what that means in practice is that we are funding in 3 ways. So first of all, connecting communities, and through that we mean supporting work around cooperation and collective power. That might be through leadership development, infrastructure and network building. We will also fund meeting needs work, so that's frontline work with London's most marginalised communities, where we prioritise service delivery that applies community insights and evidence to drive meaningful change. And then finally, there's catalysing change, and that involves supporting work that accelerates or builds initiatives that try to bring about social change. And that can mean funding advocacy, campaigning, community organising and strategic communications. And across all of our work and all of our funding, we will prioritise the empowerment of people and communities that are directly affected by inequality and injustice, so that they play a central role in shaping the future that we all want to see. And we recognise that how we fund is just as important as what we fund. So we've also been looking at our processes and how accessible our funding and work is. So we're trying to increase accessibility through things like the webinar today, the introduction of pre-application calls. And in this digital age, we think it's important now more than ever that people are able to speak to a human being to access information. And then there are the sort of 4 pillars of Standing with Londoners, and we developed 4 visions of justice. So the first is climate and environmental justice that you'll be hearing more about today. The second is access to justice, and we recently made 20 awards through the first round of the Access to Justice programme, distributing 6.5 million. Economic justice will be finalised over the summer, and we expect to open in September. And racial justice will follow in autumn. So across our grant making, we have an annual budget of around 26 million across the 4 programmes. You can find out more information about the justice areas on our website, and we will put a link in the chat. And we also publish a newsletter where we share funding opportunities, both from City Bridge Foundation and other funders. So do keep an eye out on our newsletter for further funding opportunities if the climate and environmental programme isn't right for you. So that's everything from me, and I'm going to hand over to Clara.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. I'm Clara. I'm the Programme and Partnerships Lead for Climate and Environmental Justice. I'm really excited to be walking you through the programme. So what the programme is about, who can apply, and what grants are available. So this round will be highly competitive, and unfortunately, we won't be able to support every request. But we know that probably the key question for many of you will be, will City Bridge Foundation fund our work? And unfortunately, we won't have time today to give detailed one-to-one advice or feedback. However, we do hope that by the end of this session, you'll have a clear idea of our criteria and what we're looking for and what our application process looks like. And if you still have queries or questions, there is more information on our website, including frequently asked questions, or you're also welcome to book a pre-application call with us. So just a quick reminder that we will be sharing the slides together with the webinar recording by the end of this week. So what do we mean at City Bridge Foundation when we talk about climate and environmental justice? So our vision is for a London where everyone can live in a healthy, safe and sustainable environment, where those most affected are at the forefront of shaping solutions, and where environmental benefits and burdens are shared more fairly. This programme is essentially grounded in a climate and environmental justice approach. And what we mean by that is that we're not just looking at climate as a technical issue, like reducing emissions, for example. We see it as a social justice issue that is shaped by wider inequalities. So in London, climate and environmental impacts like heat, poor housing, and pollution are already affecting daily life, but they're not shared equally. Communities who have contributed the least to these harms are often experiencing them most, shaped by inequalities linked to income, race, health, housing, and other factors. That's why we believe those most affected should be at the centre of shaping solutions. This programme centres lived experience as expertise. It recognises that communities are already responding and that lasting change comes from when they have the power, resources, and voice to lead. So our role is to support that shift so that solutions are not just effective, but fair, community-led and rooted in everyday realities. So with all that in mind, what is the focus of the first round of this programme? So this programme will fund community-led organisations working with Londoners most affected by climate and environmental injustice. We support work that improves everyday life now, such as addressing unsafe housing, heat or pollution, for example, whilst building the power to influence the systems, decisions and narratives that drive inequality. In terms of how much funding we have available for this round, there's £5.6 million, and we estimate that we'll be making between 20 to 25 grants. This is core and flexible funding over 5 years to small and medium-sized organisations with an annual income of between £50,000 to £1.5 million. So when we talk about community-led, what we mean is organisations that are led by, accountable to, or deeply embedded within the communities they serve, with lived experience shaping decisions and priorities. We are a London funder, so the work we fund must primarily benefit Londoners. We do anticipate receiving many more eligible applications than we can fund. In making the final decisions, we will consider the overall portfolio of applications and adopt an ecosystem-based approach to funding. So what we mean by this is that we may take into account factors such as geographic spread and the need to ensure both breadth and depth across the cohort of funded organisations, in line also with the programme's priorities. The organisation may apply for this round if it's currently receiving a grant from CityBridge Foundation. However, we may prioritise organisations who are new to us or that we've not recently funded. We can accept one funding application per organisation. So, in terms of what we want to fund through this round, this is just a brief overview, and we will provide more information later on in the presentation. So, organisations can engage with the programme through three different but overlapping approaches. So, an organisation's work may focus on place-based resilience, community organising and influence, or storytelling or narrative change. Organizations don't need to do all three, but your work does need to sit clearly within at least one of those approaches. There are also a few other requirements that organizations must meet. First, your work must be community-led and rooted in lived experience, meaning the people most affected are shaping decisions and leading the work, not just being consulted. Secondly, we're looking for work that is responding to real, tangible climate and environmental impacts like heat risks, poor housing conditions, pollution, flooding, or food insecurity, just to name a few. And finally, a key principle of this program is that your work needs to link immediate needs with longer term systems change. So that could mean responding to urgent issues now, while also building the power or influence needed to change the systems or decisions that are driving those issues in the first place. We're unlikely to fund work that only delivers short-term services without showing how it contributes to longer-term change. So just to summarize a little bit, that combination of improving everyday life now while working towards longer-term change is really at the heart of what we're trying to fund through this round. So I'm now going to walk us through the program eligibility. This is really important as you'll need to meet all of these to apply for this round. So first of all, as I mentioned before, your organisation must be community-led. You also need to be working primarily with communities most affected by climate and environmental harm, particularly low-income and marginalised groups. We're specifically targeting organizations working with communities experiencing disproportionate impacts as a result of structural inequalities. So that may include, for example, communities affected by racial inequality, migrant communities, people with disabilities, low-income households, and both younger and older people. You'll need to also show a track record of this kind of work. So we're looking for credible, ongoing experience and trusted relationships with communities rather than one-off projects. If your organisation is newer, we still expect to see evidence of relevant experience, for example, through previous work or partnerships that you hold. There is also an income range for this program. Your organisation should have an income of between £50,000 to £1.5 million, as shown in your latest audited accounts. In limited circumstances, if your organisation's income is just below £50,000 or just above £1.5 million, we may consider your application, but only if we discuss and agree in advance via a pre-application call. We recognise, for example, that some organisations may be doing onward grant making, and that may impact your organisation's income. In terms of your work, it needs to clearly address real climate impacts, as I've mentioned before. And importantly, your work must link immediate needs with longer term systems change, not just responding to issues, but helping to address the root causes over time. And finally, your work needs to fit within at least one of the three approaches, which we will cover in detail later on in the presentation. If you're unsure about any of these, we strongly encourage you to book a pre-application call to discuss your fit. To make your application stand out, please include clear examples and evidence in your responses. Our How to Apply guidance document is now available on our website to support you. As AI tools are increasingly being used, we sometimes receive responses that closely reflect our eligibility criteria. So, specific examples can really help us to better understand your work in practice. And just a note on AI, we recognize that AI tools can be helpful when putting together an application, for example, with drafting or improving clarity. However, it is important that your application reflects your organization's own voice and experience. We ask that you use AI transparently and avoid relying on it too heavily, as responses can sometimes become generic and less reflective of your work in practice. So I'm now going to hand over to Maria.
Thank you, Clara, and welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. So you'll see here, we've just got this infographic up, which brings together the key elements of what we're looking to fund. So just to talk it through, work that responds to immediate need while contributing to long-term systems change through one or more of the three approaches, which I will talk through. So place-based resilience, storytelling and narrative change, and community organising and influence. So something we want to be very clear about is the focus on systems change for this fund. All of the work we fund must show how it contributes to longer term change. So whether that's shifting power, influencing decisions, changing policies, or reshaping narratives, for example. We do not fund work that only provides short-term services or immediate relief without contributing to that longer term change. What matters most is that your application clearly demonstrates the climate or environmental issue you're addressing, the community most affected, and that you are community-led, and how your work contributes to long-term systems change, whether or not you are also addressing immediate needs. We'll go into this in more detail on the three approaches by what we mean in systems change for each of those for the next slides. But the key takeaway is that all organisations need to demonstrate systems change, but how that shows up will look different depending on the approach that you're taking. So to talk through the three approaches, organisations applying for this funding must deliver one or more of these three approaches. So the first approach being place-based resilience. This is about responding to climate impacts in a specific place or community within London. So, for example, local responses to heat, flooding, or poor quality housing, to name a few. The second approach is community organising and influence. This is about building collective power, so communities can shape decisions that affect their lives. And there's some more examples here as well on this table. And then finally, the third approach is storytelling and narrative change. This is about shifting how climate issues are understood by centering lived experience and community voices. So some examples also here include community storytelling and narrative reframing, arts, culture and creative practice as climate strategies, and work that counters misinformation, individual blame narratives. So to recap, organisations do not need to be doing all three of these approaches at all. So please do focus on where your work fits best within these. But what is most important is that your work goes beyond immediate response and is clearly contributing to longer term systems change. So what systems change might look like for each approach. We just go to the next slide. So we know this can feel quite an abstract thing. So we do really want to be clear about what we mean here. In practice, systems change might look like building long-term community leadership and power, influencing local authorities or housing providers, or creating ongoing ways for communities to shape decisions, for example. It can also mean shifting public understanding as well, so challenging dominant narratives or enabling communities to tell their own stories. But what we're looking for is a clear link between immediate action and longer term change. So, for example, you might be supporting people now with issues such as poor housing or pollution, for example, while also organising residents, gathering evidence or influencing decision makers to address the root causes of these. We don't expect this to look the same for every organisation, of course, so it should be proportionate to your work, but all applications do need to demonstrate how this work contributes to longer term change and not just short-term support. Applications that only deliver services without contributing to systems change are unlikely to be funded. And then just to talk you through the grants available. So we are offering 5 years of core and flexible funding to small and medium-sized organisations. And as Clara mentioned earlier, the organisation needs to have an annual income size of between £50,000 and £1.5 million to be eligible. And we are unlikely to fund organisations outside of this income bracket. The amount that you can apply for depends on your organisation's income size, which is based on your most recent annual accounts. So the larger your organisation's income, the larger the grant band you can apply for. So this table also demonstrates the 4 different grant amounts, which total over 5 years, 125,000, 200,000, 300,000 and 450,000. And then the individual annual amounts roughly are laid out in this table as well. So just to recap, these are core and flexible grants, which does mean you can use them to support your overall work as an organisation, which includes staff, delivery, and organisational development, so not just on a specific project. And then just to talk through some key terminology, I won't go through all of these right now, but this slide brings together some of the key terms that we have been using for this funding programme. So starting with place-based resilience, this is about work that is really grounded in a specific community or location in London. So responding to local climate and environmental issues in a way that's shaped by the people who live there. And then just to talk through community organising and influence, which is about building collective power, so supporting people to come together to take action and also influence the decisions that affect their lives. And storytelling and narrative change, which is slightly different, which is about shifting how these issues are understood and by centering lived experience and challenging dominant narratives. So this is more than just about communications or awareness raising, to be really clear. And then the last 3 mentioned here are really the foundations across everything for this funding programme, so community-led systems change and lived experience. So this programme may not be the right fit for you, just to talk through. First of all, if climate and environmental justice isn't really integrated into your work, for example, so if it's a small project or an add-on or something created just for this funding. Then similarly, if your work has only indirect or incidental climate benefits rather than directly addressing climate and environmental harm, it's also probably not a strong fit. And we're also less likely to fund work that is primarily service delivery or technical solutions on their own without a clear link to community leadership, lived experience, and also systems change. And then a key requirement is that this work is community-led, as we have mentioned. So if communities are being consulted but not involved in decision-making, that also wouldn't meet our criteria. We are also specifically targeting work with communities most affected by climate and environmental harms, particularly low-income and marginalised groups. So organisations not focused on those groups are also unlikely to be eligible. And then finally, just to go through systems change as well, if your work isn't contributing to systems change or does not meet the core eligibility requirements, it would not be eligible for this programme. And then just to also talk through the types of organisations that shouldn't apply and we can't fund at City Bridge Foundation. We can't fund certain organisation types such as schools, hospitals, individuals as well as political parties, or work that focuses only on short-term relief without a clear link to long-term change. And we don't also fund standalone capital costs or work outside London, or work that isn't benefiting Londoners. There are a few more detailed exclusions and criteria, so we really do encourage you to check this properly in the full list and use the eligibility checker, which we now have open on our website. And if you are still unsure about this, please do book in a pre-application call with us to talk through any questions which you may have, which is all done through our website. I'm now going to hand back over to Clara to kind of continue on the eligibility criteria.
Thanks, Maria. So alongside the programme criteria that we covered earlier in the presentation, there are a few important eligibility requirements to be aware of. So you'll need to have at least 1 year of accounts and an up-to-date safeguarding policy in place. Your organisation must also have a minimum of 3 trustees or directors and pay at least a London living wage to staff based in London. The work you're delivering must clearly benefit people living in London. And finally, your organisation needs to have an eligible legal structure. For example, being a registered charity, a charitable company, or a community interest company limited by guarantee. A full list can be found on our website. If you're unsure, we really encourage you to book a pre-application call, as mentioned earlier. So we're now going to turn on the Q&A function. So if anyone wants to ask any questions in the Q&A chat, please do so. And please check other questions as well, as others may be asking the same question as you are. So this helps to avoid duplication. And then I'm just going to talk us through the application process. So in terms of applying for this round of funding, this is what you'll need to do. So first of all, attend or watch this webinar, which you're doing so now. So you're already on the right track. Check the full eligibility criteria on our website to make sure your organisation qualifies. You can book a 15-minute pre-application telephone call via our website from the 14th of July until the 21st of August, and the booking link will be open on the 6th of July. Due to anticipated high demand, appointments will be allocated on a rolling basis and are subject to availability. So when booking, you'll be asked to share 3 questions you'd like to discuss so we can make the most of your time. If you think this is the right opportunity for you, you'll need to register online on our application portal. And via the portal, you will apply and submit your application. The applications are open on Monday, 6th of July, and it will close midday on the 8th of September. If you need to submit your application in a different format, if you require accessibility adjustments or are otherwise experiencing difficulties accessing our online form, please contact our funding team for assistance. We will share the contact details in the chat and we will add them to the slides as well. So in terms of the decision process, it has 2 stages. So stage 1 will run from September to November this year. And this is where we will review applications and shortlist those that best meet the programme's priorities. And the second stage will take place between November and December. And shortlisted applicants will have an assessment visit or call with our team. Unsuccessful applicants will also be notified at this stage. So final decisions will be made by the end of January 2027, and successful applicants will receive their first payment shortly after accepting the grant. If you're not successful, we'll offer written feedback and, where possible, a feedback call to support your future applications. All successful grantees will automatically join our Funder Plus programme. This is a learning and development cohort with training, peer learning and networking opportunities. I just wanted to add that we made some changes to our processes and application forms, and we're really testing out some new ways of working in this first round. So please bear with us if there are any teething problems. We'll be inviting feedback on your experience of navigating the information we've provided and also your experience of the application forms and the process overall. So the next slide is just outlining the key dates and timelines, which I've just covered. And so now we're going to enter the Q&A section of the webinar. Thank you so much for listening and for your patience. Please make sure you do review the guidance documents and web resources on this programme. All the links are in the chat.